And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me, I have a newcomer into the temple, creator of Motive Knight, and coming to us from Lunar Surface Games, the one and only, well, Lunar Surface. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing all right. I really appreciate you having me on. This is literally the first time I'm getting to talk to somebody outside of like my own friends and helpers, like the people that helped me playtest the game and stuff like that about it. So I really appreciate you having me on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, friends, helpers, victims, it's all the same.
I hope they don't feel like victims, but I gotta say,
I didn't say victims of you. Could be victims of the dice gods.
Oh, true. That's very true. That's very true.
Remember, the dice RNG. This is a model of true equality. Doesn't matter your background, race, gender, what have you. The dice gods hate you.
Yep. The nat 1 taketh, and the nat 20 giveth.
Mm-hmm. But I suppose I'll start with the humble beginnings, as I often do. Walk me through your first introduction to role-playing games and what made it stick.
Oh, so my very first... So I come from a family of nerds, is sort of the good thing. My dad in particular, huge sci-fi and fantasy novel reader, right? Mm-hmm. But my first like real introduction to tabletop games specifically was I have some older siblings, and they were playing with their friends. They didn't actually want me, the little kid, to come join in. Mm-hmm. So I said, "Hey, can I play this game?" And they were like, "Sure, why not? We're fighting a dragon. The dragon breathed on you. You died. Ha ha ha." Right? So mm-hmm. I was like, "All right, fine. I won't play with you," and just ran off. But then a few years later, I was in Scouts when I was like a teenager and stuff like that. And I met some people who played Dungeons and Dragons, and I was just kind of instantly hooked. It was, my favorite combination of weird fantasy stories and imaginative stuff like that, and getting to sort of goof off, but also come up with, whatever crazy things came into our minds. Mm-hmm. But then also like the gamification of it, I feel like makes it more engaging, right? Because you can have this dream of the story you're going to tell, but sort of like life, that's not necessarily the story that's going to play out, right? Because sometimes you're going to be going for the dramatic killing blow on the big bad guy and trip on your sword, mm-hmm. something like that. So I got started when I said teenager, but I think I was like 11 or something mm-hmm. like that. And I quickly became the sort of forever GM in my friend group, and have sort of been that ever since. So, 20-something years of playing these games.
Mhm.
And I guess, like a lot of people who've been Forever GMs for a while, at some point, friends started saying, "You make all these, unique settings and unique rules and things like this. Have you ever thought of publishing anything?" And I was
Mhm.
like, you know what? I'll think about that. And there were several projects I worked on before Motive Night that never really came to fruition. They never turned into anything.
Yep.
But then Motive Night was like the project that was like motivating enough for me to see it all the way through.
Mhm.
That's the short
Yeah.
version of from ancient history to today.
Yeah, and if I had the means to do it, there's a sketch I've been tooling around for years of depicting a Forever GM's Anonymous.
Uh huh.
Alcoholics Anonymous just for Forever GMs.
Right.
Um, and
I
I
feel
can,
like there might already be a subreddit for that we just don't know about.
yeah, it's just I need to get a bunch of actors who are savvy enough to be able to improv it because I'm not going to be able to script the whole thing.
Mm.
But I understand the Forever GM thing. I'm in the same boat, largely because I kept discovering games. So plus,
Hmm.
I had a height even back when I started. I had a height advantage on my players, and nobody wants to argue with the guy who's a foot taller than everyone.
Mm.
And of course, as I got older, that rule certainly kept. As I mentioned before I went live, I keep certain players in line by making them more scared of me than whatever monster is on the table.
Ah.
You know, with things like the pane glass or the bacon soda or stuff like that.
Right.
Which
I feel like. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I haven't had to use that all that much, but the existence of it is enough of a scare.
Yeah, something I tried to. I had similar tactics, especially back in the day, if you will. But I always tried to make them in game. So one of the tropes that became a mainstay in a lot of my games for a while was that if you're at a tavern, no matter what the setting is, the bartender has a shotgun under the counter, which was just to make sure that people wouldn't, start random nonsense or just you know what, we're gonna rob this place out of nowhere and things like this. It's just like be prepared for people to defend themselves
Yeah,
was kind of the point,
I think one of the first taverns in a campaign I ever ran was a tavern that was called the Flying Gnome, and
Okay.
everybody is asking why is it called the Flying Gnome? Gnomes don't fly. As they walk in and see the sign break because somebody got tossed right out, like tossed out like they got javelined out of the bar. Uh,
Hmm.
and everybody at the same time says, "Oh, that's why."
Yep.
It's, I I was basing on the fact that there are certain theaters that have the same policy as the Alamo Draft House, where if you are on your phone at all, you will be thrown out, no questions asked.
Hmm.
And I did have a more belligerent player once who had said to me, What are you gonna do? Throw me out?" I was like, "You know what? That's a great idea."
Well, yeah, since you suggested it.
I guess they figured I would just escort them out, and I'm like, "Nope, you are getting picked up and tossed." But now, when it comes to Motive Night, I think one of the first things I'd want to ask is the, for lack of a better term, the Appendix N. Are you familiar with that concept?
Not by name, no.
Uh, Appendix N was a section in early D&D that contained a list of inspirational materials, whether it be books,
Ah.
film, games, what have you, to help establish the tone of what that particular project was, and it's just become a catch-all for that kind of thing. So, with Motive Night, what would be some of the items that would fill that Appendix N?
So one of the things, one of the most poignant things that inspired Motive Night was um, just kind of life and the world, and reflecting on how, like, the stories of heroes that we tell in fantasy games frequently don't reflect the stories of heroes in real life, you know? So I know that's not exactly what you're talking about, but that would be sort of the first thing I'd say. But from that point, one of the things that I do anytime I'm working on anything, like starting a new campaign, writing Motive Night, anything like that, is I make a playlist. And so there's actually a playlist. It's available on the Motive Night YouTube channel, of the music that literally is the playlist that I would play while I was writing this. It's got a lot of metal in there. It's got like Mick Gordon, baby metal. It's got a few slightly more folksy songs as well in there, and the idea is that they're all songs that sort of evoke either the feel or the subject matter of Motive Night, this world that's really oppressive, that is sort of ruled by corrupting demons, but in which you are searching for and trying to embody the hope of change, right? I'd add on to that. Sorry, if it sounded like you might have another.
So, you mentioned a lot of metal, but metal has 1.5 billion subgenres, so...
This is true.
You mentioned Mick Gordon, you mentioned baby metal, but I'm curious if there's any folk metal in there. You know, stuff like Corpiclani or Tweer.
No, I don't have any folk metal in that one. I think I might have. I'm working on some additional sort of adventure modules. I'm calling them narratives for Motive Night, and I think I might have some folk metal in one of those playlists, but I don't have them in front of me right now, so I'd have to come back to you on that.
Yeah. I feel like there's at least one Blind Guardian track in that list.
There very well may be.
If you're dealing with fantasy metal, you're dealing with power metal, and if you're dealing with power metal, you're dealing with bands coming out of Germany or Finland.
Yeah, frequently. I don't know that. So, to be honest, I'm not actually like a huge power. I mean, I say that I have baby metal. Baby metal has a lot of power metal, but they're genre blending quite intentionally. But I think I lean a little bit more towards, in my metal consumption, stuff like Gojira, or I mentioned Mick Gordon, the sorts of
death metal.
The sorts of metal that has death metal to a certain degree. I also listen to a lot of hardcore music. Well, I shouldn't say a lot of. I listen to some hardcore music, but I'm a big fan of music that tries to blend or bridge genres. So things like baby metal, things like Mick Gordon, things like Hanabiye. It's another Japanese band.
You'd probably like Psy.
Psy.
Not the Korean pop star.
I was gonna say not the K-pop guy.
No, Psy is a black metal act that got their start in Tokyo in 1990. They're actually the first non-European black metal act to ever be signed. It's just that the label that signed them was an infamous cheapskate in Cacophonous Records, and they started doing black metal. I mean, their first album was a nod to a Venom song, and Venom's kind of the godfather of black metal. But they eventually started bridging out into anything they can get their hands on.
Gotcha.
sometimes classical, sometimes disco, sometimes electronic, just whatever they. There's always a large theme of horror. or horror adjacent things. One of their albums was one giant nod to Mozart's unfinished third act. I think
Okay.
another one was them doing a giant nod to the Divine Comedy.
Okay.
And they're also the only band I can think of that has chosen to and pulled off using a speak and spell as an instrument at one point.
Oh, that's fun.
A speak and spell and a shortwave radio.
And how do they spell psi?
SIGH.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Cool.
one of their more recent members, Dr. Mechanable, is her own brand of crazy. She joined in as a backup singer and saxophonist. She has talked about eating bugs and drinking blood in the same interview, and insists on recording her parts of albums topless.
Okay. That's that's unusual.
No one knows why she does this. They just let her.
I mean, if it works for your creative process, go for it.
Yeah. Also has a PhD in physics.
Surprise, motherfucker.
Neat. Yeah, I guess getting back to the inspirations, I would in terms of written stuff, I do think I took a lot of inspiration from like Edgar Allan Poe, Mary Shelley, George Orwell, Charlotte Perkins Gilman. I think a little bit lesser known, but wrote The Yellow Wallpaper particularly. I love that short story. But I think I took a lot of my inspiration from other games as well. Like, have you ever played Anomine by Steve Jackson Games?
Yeah. In Anomine, which I have a feeling that one of the other names you're about to mention is Cult.
I wasn't. I don't think I've played Cult actually.
Cult has been summarized as Call of Cthulhu, except you can win. You can't see it, but I'm doing massive air quotes. That's
yeah.
It's a lot of Gnostic horror. But
Is that Cult with a K?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's like there was one other project that very much leaned into that kind of horror fantasy that was using the basic role-playing engine. Aquilare. Which for the longest time we couldn't even get in English.
Right.
But it's certainly in the vein of what you're talking about, that kind of, for lack of a better term, religious horror. And
yeah,
when I looked at the page layout of the game, there's a small part of me that wonders if there was some inspiration from the presentation style of World of Darkness books.
Maybe a little subconsciously. My original thought was I wanted to do illuminated manuscripts. So I wanted to have like the big illustrated capital letter at the beginning of every chapter and things like that. And at some point I realized that I only had so much basically budget for artists, like this is completely just out of my pocket to commission the art for this project. And I realized it would take so much time and money to get that many detailed drawings and stuff like that. So I was like, you know what? I can do the borders because the borders are really cool, but I think getting the like big illuminated letters is maybe beyond what I could reasonably afford.
I will note as far as music references, I'll have to share with you Bal Sagoth later on.
Okay.
They are a symphonic black
I'm
metal
always down
act
for new
that
music.
through the course of 6 albums, created an entire setting.
Oh, neat.
Uh, it starts out in very Conan-like affairs, but it does not stop there. Within a few albums, we're talking about Atlantis and cosmic travelers.
Gotcha.
Uh, so escalation, but now when it comes to this idea of the player characters being members of these secretive orders, which admittedly that was part of the reason why I kept thinking of World of Darkness.
Yeah.
What gave you the idea of having people be these orders of knights? Is it because of the um, romantic chivalry aspect fit what you were trying to do with Mode of Knight?
So it was, to be honest, I don't remember where exactly the words motive knight came from. Well, I know motive came from the idea of the soul. Because the soul is a very centric idea in this setting. You have the soul as a character attribute, and your supernatural powers come from awakening and tapping into the powers of your soul. And I wanted to draw on, so it'll become very immediately obvious to you. My undergrad was in philosophy. I wanted to draw on some of the ideas of ancient philosophy and the soul as the source of movement and motivity, the literally what physically animates a body, right? So, for example, like in the introduction, there's like right on page 5, there's this like letter that starts with "What is a soul exactly?" Those were literally the first 5 words I wrote of the whole thing. And at some point, the idea of motive something, I think, came out. And I liked the idea of motive knight, specifically because these are orders of people that used to be at the forefront of society, right? Because during the, so in the setting, there was several hundred years ago this invasion of the demonic forces that now rule the world, and during that invasion, the motive knights were at the forefront of everything, trying to stop this invasion, defend the world from this encroaching evil. And now they are now having to hide away, and like try to complete these missions in secret to make the world suck at least a little bit less. And I really thought that it was an interesting thing to play on the idea of the knight, somebody that we traditionally think of as like a symbol of a movement or of a people, but they can't be a symbol because they exist in a world that hates them for trying to do what they want to do, or at the very least, the structures of power hunt them for doing it.
Yeah.
So I thought that was, yeah. So I thought, so yeah, somewhat those chivalric ideas, but specifically subverting them because of the horrific aspects of the world that they live in.
And to a certain extent, I get a very strong vibe of certain gothic hero archetypes that were prevalent in 90s comics, especially Spawn, and to a certain extent some of the stuff that Shotaro Ishinomori was doing back in the Showa era. Especially, well, I'd say the most obvious would be something like Devilman. But but since I brought up Ishinomori, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the Skull Man, which, technically speaking, is the first anti-hero in comics. It beat out the Punisher by about a year.
Right.
And there, as a child of the '90s, like many others, obviously you have the paradigm of characters like the X-Men who are trying to do the right thing, even though the world hates and fears them.
Yep.
And given the fact I mentioned gothic heroes, Spawn also is going to get brought up.
Naturally, yeah.
But I'd like to go through the different knightly orders since they are the closest thing to a class in this game and kind of get a feel for what sort of archetypes in other fantasy games might be a close parallel to them, just to help bridge that
Okay.
gap. So, and I realize each one has specializations in them, but the first
Yeah.
one would be the Order of the Anointed.
Yeah, so with the Order of the Anointed, I definitely started with all the orders. I kind of started with the idea of um, what what strategy do they have to make the world better,
Hmm.
right? So with the Order of the Anointed, their main focus is on protecting the natural land and the natural creatures of the world.
Hmm.
Natural, like obviously they want, you know, humanoid species to also survive all of this and hopefully someday be able to come out the other side if that's even possible.
Hmm.
But their focus, because you can't do everything, is to try to protect nature. So I would definitely say they have one of the clearest parallels to something sort of like your druids and rangers, for example, if you're
Hmm.
comparing to D&D.
Yeah, the Song of Companionship is definitely leans into the ranger with the animal companion. Um,
Hmm.
and as an aside, I do appreciate that each of that the naming convention for each of the specializations with the order is different between them. Like for the anointed, it is songs.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, I really wanted them to feel like I will definitely say that's one area where I do think I took a little more like conscious World of Darkness inspiration. I wanted each of the orders to feel like they had their own culture to
mhm.
a certain degree, sort of like if you're playing vampire, each um um oh, I suddenly forget the word, but
Clan.
the different yeah, thank you. The different clans of vampires have their own culture. You feel like you're a part of a different organization by being of one clan as opposed to another. Even if your specific, adventuring party might be, a whole mix of different members of different clans, right? Who've
Yeah.
come together under crazy circumstances. Your character is still rooted in something concrete and of being a member of the order means
Hmm.
something from a character building perspective.
Yeah. And it's funny you bring that up because there's also the fact that there are certain rules that you have to follow if you're one of the kindred in Vampire.
Hmm.
You know, the obviously the big one is do not break the masquerade. Uh,
Right.
there's a bit of leeway because sometimes things happen, but if you test that patience too much, you might have the Camarilla decide that this whole unlife thing just ain't for you.
Yeah, you're better off normal dead.
Hmm. Uh, in and because of that, you have the conflict of how to maintain the eternal game of shadows that is the modern knights, and with the knightly orders that you have for motive knight, um, regardless, they have certain responsibilities that they have to adhere to.
Right.
Uh, although I will note, with the Song of Fury, I'm reminded of the if I'm going to use D&D, the barbarian as it was in fourth edition, the edition I'm supposed to hate, but the check bounced.
Oh, true. True. Yeah, I share your sentiment with that somewhat.
Hmm.
When fourth edition first came out, I was really annoyed by it, and then I had a friend who ran a game of it, and I was like, you know what? The only reason I was mad at it is because it wasn't the thing I had before, but the thing I had before is still there. This is just something new and different that I can use
Hmm.
for a different type of experience.
Yeah, and for those who are less familiar, with fourth edition, it had different power sources for different classes, and one of
Hmm.
them was the primal power source, which was described as the spirit of the world that did not care for the gods and demons fighting on its lawn. And barbarian was a primal archetype instead of a martial one. And one of
Right.
its big things was its furies were about channeling animal spirits. Uh, which in that regard would make them a very angry cheval if you're familiar with voodoo.
Only very vaguely, but yeah,
Uh,
I agree. It does sound like that would be about right.
yeah, since one of the one of the concepts with berserkers is the idea of being possessed by a wolf or a bear spirit. Uh, or the alternative is them just being high as balls because remember berserker means bear shirt.
Right.
But whether that's them wearing bear skins or them wearing nothing up there is up to interpretation. Uh, I'd say one of the better representatives of that kind of berserker-like possession is the raiding scene in The Northman. If you've seen that movie,
I think I did, but it was not recent.
but with the Order of the Damned, is that a case of using the weapons of the enemy against them, kind of thing?
That was definitely the core inspiration for it. Is I was thinking basically, there are sources of power that are more risky than others, and there's always going to be people willing to take the risk. So I was like, what does that look like in this case? And I was like, well, I think one of the main things that looks like is trying to be a part of those corrupted structures of power. So, trying to be a knight in the service of the corrupted king or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then trying to use those positions to secretly work to the betterment of the people under it, or even simply to the defeat of the people doing the evil, if you will.
Yeah.
So yeah, that it's very much a using the tools of the enemy. It's
The
also a little bit of just sort of your like rogue and assassin kind of thing, a little bit as well.
Yeah, the vibe that I ended up getting from what I read was that of the man on the inside spy.
Yeah.
The and Rogue can certainly feel like that, but I feel like the typical D&D rogue, because of the whole dungeon delving thing, doesn't fully get to embrace that. What we have here is more akin to a um, a Jason Bourne of if anything.
I would certainly take that. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, certainly. Especially like Executioner's Conviction. I think it's
mhm.
very Jason Bourne.
Yeah, the the idea. I could also bring up James Bond in some forms, which a lot of people end up forgetting that the whole womanizing part is just an act.
Right. Or at the very least it's done as a means to an end, it
Hmm.
seems, in Bond.
Pretty much, and I think in there was one instance in Tomorrow Never Dies where he ended up confronting the woman who he was sleeping with, who ended up being the big bad, and she was like, "You'll miss me when I'm gone." Then she immediately gets shot, and he says, "I never miss," in just the coldest way
Right.
possible. Like I had as if I had no feeling for you whatsoever. This was just a job.
Yeah. I would also say I think very similar to what you're saying with Bond and just basically willing to do bad things for what is meant to be good ends. There are
Mhm.
also some parallel here with have you seen the movie Serenity as relating to the show Firefly?
You're talking about the operative, aren't you?
Yeah, the operative, the man who says, "I am fighting for a better world in which I will have no place,"
Hmm.
right? Like somebody who's trying to bring about a world where the terrible things that they have stooped to are no longer needed or appropriate.
Yeah, and him saying so in oh, in a way that is very anti-villainous. Like he's not boasting about it. It's a very matter of fact. Here's what's going to happen. Here's what I'm going to do. Uh,
Right.
I'd say, and I when I was running a Firefly campaign, I did use him in one of them because I was going with this theme of after the broadcast regarding the Reavers, a lot of people got pissed off. Some of those people who got pissed off had guns, and thus you have a reincarnation of the Civil War caused by a group called the Dust Devils. But
Hmm. Okay.
the former Browncoats, they are like their attitude is, I understand where you're coming from, but you're going way too far.
Right.
Because the Dust Devils do not believe in collateral damage. And the operative in that story had chosen to take up faith, much like Book, um, just calling himself Shepherd Iscariot, because I decided I was going to be cute. But with the Order of Elucidation, which seems to have a very specific kind of oath compared to some of the others.
Yeah.
It seems that this is more the scholar, the mage. I mean, they can craft wands as one of their starting things.
Yeah. I would definitely say this is the closest thing to like a traditional wizard type of thing you would find. I also think of it, though the game mechanics aren't quite the same. It's not the closest in game mechanics. I would say the culture of them is very similar to like your traditional paladin archetype as well. They are trying to win out this war through order, through structure, through organization. They believe that if they can gather enough people under the right leadership and with the right sort of code of conduct and idea of operation, that they can eventually move the ball forward, as it were, in fighting back against the demonic overlords. But yeah, also it's wizard paladins, if you will. Yeah, one of the implement artisans literally craft wands. The people who practice the implement of destruction are basically casting magic missile is like their primary ability. And then the people with the implement obsolescence are sort of like abjurationists almost. Though that's they can do a few different things with that, of course. They're also kind of like the rich people, if you will, comparatively, because they're all about working with these gemstones. And so there's kind of this implicit idea that they seem to have access to rare materials that no one else is getting. Like no one else. Every single paradigm under the Order of the Elucidation is effectively starting with a free item or money almost, whereas no other order has any of that.
But when it comes to the Order of the Liberation,
Right.
I feel like, based on what I've seen, this falls into the scholarly, the person who knows all of your secrets, even the ones that you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. I don't remember. One of the jokes I had was that the Order of the Liberation is secretly the Order of Librarians. They're collecting knowledge as far and wide as they can, and making sure that it cannot be destroyed, but also making sure that it can be used.
You brought up 40k in the inspiration list, so I'm immediately thinking of the Blood
Yeah.
Ravens. and
True.
the Dark Angels when they're
Also true.
when they're not pissing off people who are more traditional with the code hex.
Hmm.
But through think you have the scribe, which is all about writing. You have the stars, which in a roundabout way reminds me of some of the celestial wizards in Warhammer Fantasy.
Okay. Yeah, true.
Uh, at least it's not the Gold Order, so you don't have a case of I cast economic recession.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I was the Academy of the Stars to me was a lot of inspired by like astrology and
Mhm.
that sort of stuff, and using the stars to predict the future or
Yeah.
to um, predict the path to blessings and that sort of
Mhm.
thing.
Whereas the Academy of the Monstrous, the the vibe I end up getting is some of those um Monster of the Week, modern fantasy TV shows that were all over the place in the mid '90s. Yes,
Oh
this
yeah, I
includes the
think I
Buffyverse, but
think
also stuff like um
y-
Grimm or the TV version of Constantine.
yeah, I was literally about to say I think Giles from Buffy
Hmm.
would, if made in Mode of Night, be in the Academy of the Monstrous, like very clearly. He does the research and looks up like, you need to use this type of weapon against this demon, and then suddenly everybody gets, plus 2d4 damage
Yeah.
on all their attacks or whatever, right?
I'd also say Whistler in the Blade movies,
Mm-mm. Yeah.
since he's the one who is making all the equipment and also elucidates um, how vampires are dealt with in that universe and the rules therein. And
Yeah.
is the one who discovered the weakness to EDTA. Uh, EDTA is an anticoagulant, but in that universe you apply it to vampire blood, and the blood cells start overproducing until the body pops.
Right.
But the last order, the Order of the Sunken Tower, feels the most fighter, the most martial. Um, the
Yeah.
the the it feels like what would happen if you had a group of organized mercenaries who were joining this particular fight against the demons. Uh, maybe it's just me, but I get certain vibes of things like the Grey Wardens in Dragon Age, as well as the Band of the Hawk.
Yeah, I definitely see the Grey Warden comparison, especially. You could easily imagine naturally they probably wouldn't announce themselves as such,
Hmm.
right? In the current state of the world, because the fact that their mode of knights needs to be kept secret. But you could easily imagine a couple of mercenaries joining a group of soldiers who are going to a fight in this setting, and then on the battlefield, the other soldiers see them doing these just absolutely spectacular, like supernatural feats against the enemies,
Hmm.
and maybe at some point they witness like an exorcism or something like this, and then suddenly those two mercenaries just jump on horses and ride away as fast as they can so that nobody can catch up with them
Hmm.
or something. They're like, I did my good here for the month, thanks, bye.
Yep. Like the artillery is definitely for those who do ranged combat. But
Mhm.
I enjoy the concept of running drills as part of their kit. I could see because what I see in them is akin to less akin to a crossbowman or something like that, and more akin to um re- forming ranks in rifle teams. Something akin to like the Swedish Karelians. where it's like you
Hmm.
march until you're close and then you shoot. Doesn't matter how many bullets are aimed at you, you keep marching until you're close enough and then you fire.
Yeah. No, 100%. The military feel is, that's very much how the Order of the Sunken Tower is structured. It's the boldest, if you will, of the orders
Mhm.
out here with the idea that so long as we can organize ourselves in the back end well enough that we can escape and like scatter and remain unfindable after, then
Mhm.
we can strike as big a blow as we want. Right?
Yeah.
The name kind of says it all. You can go to their tower of solitude, their fortress, and
Mhm.
just sink it. Just you know, take it absolutely to the ground.
Yeah.
But then on the back end, they make sure that they have the resources to escape.
Yeah. The I know it'd be tempting for someone to look at the Vanguard and think of Berserker. What I see in that is a line breaker. Uh,
Yeah.
like their approach is not just that they hit hard, but that they break anybody's will to actually hit them back.
Yeah, very
Essentially, a
true.
combat
And
bully.
one of the things Yeah, one of the things that's funny about the maledictions, their foundation ability, is the malediction actually does more damage the more exhausted you get. So basically, the further on they've been fighting, like the longer they've been in this battle, the
Hmm.
more likely that they can just drop like a one-shot kill on an enemy as well, right? So
Hmm.
particularly with the Vanguard, you can imagine from like a villainous perspective if they've identified that like the forward soldier who's like got a big shield and a sword and is just constantly plowing through one line of mooks after the other trying to get to them is probably a malediction of the Vanguard. they're
Hmm.
almost they almost want to go face them sooner because they're actually less threatening the less exhausted they've gotten.
Yeah,
Like they either need to drop before they get to me, or I need to get to them before they can, take my arm off in a single sweep of a sword.
yeah. I remember seeing that one trailer for Elder Scrolls Online where they were going into a very Britain themed area, and just this one knight with a greatsword is just going to town on everybody. Even the three mascot heroes, he's just doesn't have any of their extra normal abilities, and they just don't stand a chance.
Hmm.
Uh, but when it when it comes to when it comes to the power setup that you have, uh,
Yeah.
obviously a lot of it is tied to soul. But as tempting as it might be for some to refer to this as um, as spells, I believe the way you have it set up is that each of these powers work differently and are more based on the skill system rather than a resource.
Yeah. So exhaustion is so there's two sort of quote unquote resources, but they never hit zero, which is exhaustion and insanity. So corrupted abilities will frequently give insanity. Like you might take insanity to activate them if you
Hmm.
have access to corrupted abilities. And some abilities will cause exhaustion, but a lot of abilities don't cause any exhaustion, so there's no resource expenditure at all. It's just action economy and then how good are you at it.
Hmm.
So one of the sort of gameplay philosophies that I wanted to build the system around is that everything is a skill, by which I mean anything that your character can do, you can make active choices for them to get better at it. And like that's partly because I think after decades of playing, D20 system games that have like BAB or proficiency bonus to attack rolls and things like this,
Hmm.
I thought it was really weird that you know how much you've studied the blade, for lack of a better way to put it, is treated completely differently than how much you've studied magic, which is also completely treated completely differently than how much you've studied social encounters and how to navigate those. And so
Yeah.
I wanted to put everything on as level a playing field as possible. So
Mhm.
I have skills in two categories: mundane skills and soul skills. And soul
Mhm.
skills are the skills that power any supernatural ability that you use, and each soul skill has its own function just as a soul skill all by itself as well.
Mhm.
So like contact is one of the soul skills, and it powers a lot of like divination and sort of sending type things, but it can also be used to literally just perform seances, like
Mhm.
even without taking any special supernatural ability, just by having a point in contact you can perform seances.
Mhm. And this is where I end up channeling World of Darkness once again, because due to this, everybody on some level is a Gish.
Yes, yeah, one of the that's 100% true. One of the sort of foundational ideas is that every motive knight, to be a motive knight literally means that you have an awakened soul, which means you have access to these supernatural abilities.
Mhm.
One of the funny things when I was writing this, at one point, my spouse asked me like, "Hey, what do you know? What if somebody wants to make somebody who's not a motive knight in this system?" And I said, someday I might write those rules, but right now I think I need to finish the rules for motive knights, and I can figure out what that looks like later.
Yeah.
Um,
Best not to get
because
eyes bigger than your stomach.
yeah, exactly. I'm like this is already a pretty big project, so I don't I don't want to try to add in what that looks like, but yeah, so the core concept of it is that everybody is sort of like you put it a gish. They are, though, I mean, you could also make somebody who has these supernatural abilities and no combat skills, right? So it's a little bit less gishy. You could lean just into the supernatural, into the magic, if you want to call it that.
Mhm.
I had when doing playtesting, one of the characters um, literally had zero combat skills, and the only reason that their character even had a knife is because they were like, well, I feel like if they don't even have a weapon to hold, I can't bluff somebody that I'm going to hurt them until I show them that I have supernatural powers, and I don't want to do that.
Mhm.
So they literally got a knife just so that they could like use something to like try to bluff or intimidate people without having to immediately resort to something that's supposed to be secret.
Yeah, I could see that. And for whatever reason, I instantly ended up thinking of the "That's not a nice" scene in Crocodile Dundee,
Very true. Good idea. Good
which
point.
it is very much a classic case of intimidation. uh,
Yeah.
but for when it comes to that separation, my theory on why that's a thing in a lot of D20 based games is a case of a vestige, because you're dealing with games that are succeeding um, war games. And if you look at a lot of
Yeah.
war games, especially ones that came out in the 70s, you had that separation of mechanics. This is something that got gradually phased out of the greater TTRPG landscape, especially as we get closer to the 90s, where you have the more skill-based approaches, and in a lot of cases a unified mechanic as opposed to a collection of sub-mechanics.
Yeah.
Like you
Like World of Darkness, for example, it doesn't have two different mechanics.
No, all roads lead to that D10 pool. Doesn't matter whether you're doing a
Yeah.
standard skill, whether you're using your vampiric gifts, whether you're doing combat. All roads lead to Rome.
Exactly.
Uh, and the when third edition came around with the D20 system, there was an attempt to do that, but there wasn't a full commitment. Uh, some of it is because the tradition mind virus is certainly a thing, uh, especially when it
Yeah.
comes to magic. this will probably come as no surprise. I've never liked the spells per day model, the Vancian model as it's known. I didn't like it when I started, and I certainly don't like it now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I think I've often. Oh, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
a lot of those odd things that you see are directly or indirectly the result of carrying habits that were ingrained in wargaming that stuck around because tradition. If I had a soundboard for it, I would have played the tradition thing from Fiddler on the Roof.
Tradition.
Mm.
Yeah, very true. Um, and the funny thing, I don't think I was thinking about this consciously when I was making Mode of Night, but I have a number of friends that don't like playing casters, and they'll tell you like, oh, I don't like playing casters, and part of the reason for that I think is because in systems that have like spells per day and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
you have this like whole management sim that like sits beside your character, right? Part of your play experience becomes managing your spells, whether it's the ones you've prepared and the ones you haven't, or how many you have left, and you're constantly having to think ahead, like, oh, do I want to use this spell now? Do I not want to use this spell now? What if I need that later? And
I'd imagine that would be less of a problem if it weren't for the fact that you have to wait 8 damn hours to get it back.
right,
But it's in chainmail, for instance, wizards were the equivalent of artillery.
yeah,
And as mentioned before, the whole Vancian model comes from Jack Vance, and the fact that you had to prepare your spells in advance because of the way magic worked in that. Again, old habits die very, very hard. But
yeah, very
I,
true.
I cert I think the closest thing to that I would say Soulburn, but the vibe that I get from Soulburn is more akin to an MP system that you would see in some video game RPGs, or if they're not mages, then energy.
So that's I think that's odd to think about it that way. The way I thought of Soulburn is like um getting infected with a supernatural disease, because you don't automatically have Soulburn, but you can like a lot of demonic abilities can give it to you. There's a few abilities that Mode of Knights could potentially have access to that can give Soulburn, and it becomes this like literal damage you take, right, when activating your soul.
Mhm.
Um, well, but by the same token, I can kind of see where you're coming from, because if you do get Soulburn, then you do sort of have this like you are now sort of you do have sort of a resource you're spending every time you're activating your soul. It's just health.
Yeah, obviously it's not going to be a 1-to-1, but the point is that because of how it ends up working, you don't have the situation that um, I like to call the rainy day paradox, uh,
Mhm.
also known as 99 megalixirs. The whole
Oh, yeah, yeah,
I can't use one of my 99 healing potions. What if I need it for later? He says at the final boss of the campaign.
right, exactly.
Because we've all held on to a healing potion until the heat death of the universe. I'm not too proud to deny that.
Yeah, I also went into Sephiroth with 99 elixirs or something like that.
Mhm.
We've all done it.
Yeah, we've all done it. We've all thought, what if I need it for later? Oh,
Hmm.
but when it comes to like, I do want to touch on skills, because as somebody who grew up in the '90s, I dealt with my fair share of games that used extensive skill systems, and a lot of them had not only skills but specializations in skills, which did result in bloat. Uh,
Right.
for example, having every single knowledge subject be its own skill, or every single crafting specialty. I'm guessing through things like knowledge specialties, that's your way of mitigating that bloat.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. I originally the first so like probably every game ever, I basically wrote this book twice, right? I wrote it and then I rewrote it and then I rewrote it.
Hmm.
And the very first ever drafting of the skill system did have like each knowledge area was sort of its own skill that you would, in theory, just have to keep putting points in forever if you wanted to stay as knowledgeable as possible. In theory, at some point, you're an expert in the field, and more points is just being even more expert, even more secret knowledge.
Hmm.
But I thought, that really penalizes somebody who wants to be knowledgeable in everything. And ultimately, as much counterbalancing that simulation of real life where you want to be like, yeah, knowing everything is hard. It takes a lot of work. Um, but then also making sure that the game can be fun and engaging, and
Hmm.
that you don't need 1,000 skill points to know to make a character that knows stuff. I came up with the system where you basically spend a skill point to gain proficiency in a knowledge, essentially,
Hmm.
and then you have this proficiency score that just goes up automatically with your skill max, so with your maximum number of skill points per skill as you advance. So you can just kind of be like, okay, I'm going to invest a couple of skill points into the fact that my character knows about demonology
Hmm.
and knows about I'm trying to pick another one at random, but knows about these two different areas of knowledge, and then you can go, and that'll put a small dent in your character, your skill points at that point in time. But then as you gain more experience, you can be like, all right, but now that I've got those out of the way, I can um, branch out and also get some skill points in some of these additional skills, some crafting skills or some whatever else. I
Hmm.
didn't think there was really a good way to narrow down the crafting side of it, though, because I think crafting is something that is significant in this setting, specifically because players are supposed to be impoverished. Motive Knights are not wealthy, and they're never
With one
supposed to become
exception.
wealthy. Yeah, true, true. With the exception of the Order of the Elucidation, who are running around with gems, and some of them are blowing their gems up to do supernatural tricks.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, most motive knights are never going to be wealthy, so the ability to craft your own armor should be like genuinely seen as like a big character plus in this, right? If you have somebody in your group who's an armorer, and ideally if you have a storyteller, GM, whatever you want to call it, who is pacing things well enough that you can actually make use of that skill, then you're getting like consistent armor upgrades that you otherwise would never be able to afford, or that you'd only be able to like pillage off the enemies, and then like they only half fit you, and like that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
So I think so. I still kept the crafting as
Yeah.
something that you need to continue investing in if you want to continue improving. But I thought knowledge was a little bit better to give the
Yeah.
like you just put a point in it to get the knowledge specialty, and then it will grow as you grow.
And when you mentioned that, I did come to a realization that a very good representative of the Order of the Sinking Tower would be Gotrek and Felix.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, for sure. I can see
because
that.
despite the many, many achievements that they have, their living conditions are still the equivalent of first level characters. Obviously, Gotrek doesn't care about his living conditions. He's a slayer. He's trying to find an honorable death. He's just very, very bad at it because anything that goes up against him tends to die horribly. Uh,
Right.
and Felix is still a wanted criminal for starting a tax riot and killing off a member of the of the elite of the guard, essentially. Uh, so, so it's not like he'd want to be any more famous. The sole reason he's on the run with Gotrek is because of the fact that he's on the wanted list.
Right.
Uh, well, that and he promised he'd be Gotrek's rememberer and learned the hard way. Dwarves take oaths seriously, even promises.
Right.
So, no backing out. That. And in the in that same in that same kind of vein, um, do you consider this a game that works better with theater of the mind for combat, or works better for grid combat, or is it either or?
It's a great question. So, I definitely wrote it with gridded combat in mind, partly because, I feel like it's a lot easier for people to ignore a rule they don't want to use than it is to make up a rule that doesn't exist. So if I didn't write it with like gridded combat included, then it would be really hard for people to come up with how to do that if they wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely prefer to run gridded combat, or alternatively measured combat. So this is literally something that I don't remember even who. I was watching some YouTube video while I was writing this that was talking about games, and they talked about just taking a piece of string, putting it alongside a ruler, and just marking it every inch, and going, you don't necessarily need a gridded mat. You can just turn everything into 1 inch, right? Because every square on the standard gridded mat is 1 inch. And I was like, oh my gosh, how revolutionary that is. You could just take your figures, leave your mat at home. Figures are much easier to transport as well, right? Take your little string. You maybe make it a 2-foot string just in case you need to measure something really long. And so that's part of why everything in Mode of Night talks about spaces, so that you can use spaces to mean sort of whatever measurement you want it to mean. I do have in chapter 10, the storytelling chapter, a little bit of talk about some suggestions on how to do theater of their mind and how to do some like estimated distances as opposed to the precise distances.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely think my preference is the gridded combat and the slightly more tactical type of stuff. In part, also something that I think a lot of people who come to this primarily from like D&D or Pathfinder might be surprised by is because the spaces are written to be meters, so each space is 1 meter across. Some weapon reach is longer by space than you might normally think it to be. So like a two-handed sword is a reach weapon in this game, because you can easily hit somebody, over 6 feet away from you with one of those things. A long spear reaches like 3 or 4 spaces. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
But so, and part of the reason of including that was to, one, try to make combat feel more small and local, right? Like a lot of fights take place in a really small space. And I wanted to emphasize how dramatic the difference in having like a 4-foot sword versus a 2-foot sword is, right? In like a real fight, that amount of reach advantage could decide the encounter for you. And naturally, it's not quite that dramatic in Mode of Night. You're not just going to instantly lose because you have the shorter sword. But I wanted something where those sorts of decisions aren't just changing the die size that you're rolling for damage.
Mm-hmm. Which I can certainly get that. So now that the core book is out in the wild, what are your next plans? I think you talked about writing adventures.
Yeah, so the same time the core book was published, I also put up on the Mode of Night website, just motivenight.com. The first narrative, narrative 1A, it's called Bite the Hand That Feeds. It's literally the playtest module that I used with the playtesters. And there's some sample characters up as well. If people don't want to like dive into character creation before trying that out. But and my part of the reason I called it narrative 1A is what I really want to do is do series of narratives that can be either played each one as a standalone adventure or play them all in a campaign. So this is the A series that I'm working on right now. I don't know how many years it'll take me to finish it, but and then at some point I have an idea for like a B series as well. But the I'm already working on. I've already like got playlists half done for the next steps in that A series narrative. And so to give a bit of a teaser, the Bite That Hand That Feeds is sort of like a fast-paced investigation. Like you've got like an emergency going on. You're kind of trapped in a place, and you're trying to find the root of a problem before the whole city sort of tears itself to pieces. And then I'm gonna have a small like I don't know what to call it yet. I was almost thinking of like vignette adventure or something like that, a little bridging thing. It's just like a one shot that's an optional bridge between that and the next one. And the next one, I'll give the teaser. It focuses around a haunted house, and like a whole manor house, basically. So not just like a house, but like the whole manor grounds around it and stuff like that. I think it's going to be really rad.
Yep. That one. Hopefully that one shows up around Halloween time, because I think it kind of has to.
That would be my hope. I don't know if I'll be able to finish it that fast, but I'm going to do my best. I do have the like 9 to 5 to contend with, you know.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, that's the hope.
But with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my monastery. And anytime you see fit to return, whether it's for more of Motive Night or just to shitpost, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged.
Well, I definitely enjoyed talking with you. I'd be happy to be back sometime. If nothing else, when I've got that that second narrative ready, maybe that'll be a good time to come back by. But yeah, thanks very much for having me. This was great talking with you.
Oh yeah. And, of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there'll be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra, I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody!